My name is Bob Rooney. I've been designated by the mayor to serve as his designee at this hearing.
Can't hear you.
Speak up.
Speak up.
Pursuant to the Chief of Police contract dated March 5th, 2009. I have a motion from the city to limit the scope of Sweeney Mooney's testimony. Would the city like to be heard on the motion?
Yes. First of all, my name is Robert Sinsheimer, and I represent the city of Newton in this matter. The motion limine addresses the fact that there is, perhaps unfortunately, a criminal charge pending against Ms. Mooney. She has an absolute constitutional right to remain silent with respect to that. The city's view is that that's irrelevant to the narrow charges that have been laid out before the officer and at this hearing.
Would the Chief Cummings counsel like to be heard in this motion?
Burke, yes.
Mr. Burke.
She can exercise the Fifth Amendment privilege. I've never seen that done in any situation before the witness even takes a stand. And I don't know how you can possibly limit my scope of cross-examination when you haven't heard her direct. And the motivation behind her allegations against this chief, which are 2 years old, is completely relevant to why she brought them 2 years afterwards. She was suspended on September 22nd, and it isn't until approximately May 21st when the first inkling was that there is any indication of any impropriety on the part of the chief. So it is absolutely relevant, it is material, and it is something that I intend to cross-examine her on.
On the first motion, that limits the testimony of Ms. Sweeney, Ms. Mooney, I will allow that motion to the extent that I agree that her pending criminal case is not relevant as to whether the Chief Cummings has violated his contract. Are there any other motions at this time?
I have one, and it's really related, and this is to preclude the testimony of someone named Edward Johnson. For the record, Edward Johnson had been at one point retained by the city of Newton to investigate the same allegations of criminality that are addressed in the motion we've already discussed. Those charges are separate. There'll be a day in court for Ms. Mooney. They're not relevant here today.
When you say that you're trying to preclude Lieutenant Johnson, Lieutenant Johnson's a former member of the state police. He was hired, he was commissioned by the city of Newton to come in and investigate the allegations surrounding the theft of $600 in cash and $1,400 in checks out of the chief's office. This is not somebody who I have hired as a witness on behalf of the chief. This is the city's employee who conducted an investigation relative to the entire backdrop of what the motivation is behind these allegations that he's here to answer. I don't know how you can possibly bifurcate out a section of this whole scenario and say we don't want to have any kind of comment or any kind of recognition that the city conducted an investigation through a retired state police officer. He did that. He reached the conclusion, independent of anything that the chief said or did, that she was responsible for the theft of this money. And that, again, is important. It's germane to the issue of what her motivation is, particularly in light of the fact that it took the length of time that it did for her to raise these contentions and allegations against the chief.
On the second motion, that Mr. Johnson be precluded from testifying, I am allowing that motion. Seeing as Mr. Johnson is not a fact witness in this case, he investigated a different case, and that does not have bearing on this contract violation. Are there any other motions at this time?
There is. And I say this most respectfully. I had sent a letter requesting that there be an independent hearing officer, and this is no affront to you, but there are numerous individuals within the area of Newton who are retired judges, retired U.S. attorneys, who have no dog in the fight here, and who can be independent hearing officers. Mr. Rooney, this case is different from other disciplinary cases. And it's different because the normal circumstance is the appointing authority, in this case the mayor, appoints somebody who has the ability or a connection to the city or the community to sit in judgment. What's different about this case is that the mayor has gone on record publicly, stated at a press conference that his intention is to fire the chief of police. That was made public, not just to his friends and family, it was to the world. What's different about this case is he's gone on record already indicating that his intention is to fire the chief of police. The difference is here that the chief is involved in a lawsuit, he is named as a defendant, and more significantly, so is the city solicitor, and so is the mayor of this city. He's being sued in his official capacity as the mayor. He's also being sued in his personal capacity as an individual. And if you look at the complaint that was filed against the chief, against the mayor, and Donnalyn Kahn, the city solicitor, the attorneys for the other side took great pains to name the mayor and say he's sued in his official, and then the word "and" in bold letters, and personal individual capacity. And that's what makes this case different. The mayor has potential personal financial loss liability if he loses that MCAD case. And what's significant about that is he is at risk. He has already gone on record to say that he wants to fire my client. But in their city response that was sent to the MCAD, it was sent without the chief, even though he's a defendant, and even though there's a conflict of interest here, the city solicitor's office represented him in that answer, in that response, without him even seeing beforehand what they were saying the defense was. And if you look at that exhibit, which we'll present to you, in that exhibit it says the chief made the sole and exclusive decision to prosecute Ms. Sweeney. He never saw it before it went in there. They have used, without him seeing it, them representing him, filed this answer to exonerate themselves and implicate him. That's where the MCAD case is left. Following that, they now go on TV, he goes on TV, says he's going to fire him, and then has you appointed, and he's put you in a very difficult position. My motion is to have you recuse yourself, because it is the financial interest that is different in this case because of the pending litigation that puts you in a very difficult position to serve the individual who hired you. When that person stands to gain and benefit by the chief being terminated, there's a clear-cut conflict of interest in the city having any kind of connection to this case in the hearing of this chief and his discipline when they have represented him and they are adverse to his interest and they have a financial benefit to gain to implicate him. So I'm asking you in good conscience and good faith to recuse yourself, to set this case aside for another hearing before an independent hearing officer.
Thank you. On the third motion, that I recuse myself. I'm not going to recuse myself. The motion is denied. We are following the contract, which specifically states that the mayor or his designee will conduct a hearing, and we're doing exactly what the contract stipulated.
Our view is that this is a relatively simple contract case. It allows the city to terminate the chief for cause, and it lists a number of possible causes, one of which is, quote, conduct unbecoming a police chief, end quote.
Well, obviously, your ruling has limited the evidence that we believe is very beneficial to the chief. And the evidence that's beneficial to the chief is the motive behind these scurrilous accusations against him. The ones who use profanity more than any police officer are the two principal antagonists against my client. You're going to hear through all of these witnesses they're going to call. There's been a police officer in the police department for 32 years. There isn't a single person who they're going to call who's ever heard him say before or after this incident, these allegations, the word bitch or whore. Nobody. The only person who makes this allegation is somebody who's accused of a serious crime. internal theft.
Yeah.
And you're currently charged with larceny?
Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. It's clear that the motivation for her bringing these allegations against him some 2 years later is singularly tied to the fact that she was charged criminally. Nothing to do with any hostile work environment on his part. This is somebody this police department and this city should be proud of. Ma'am, going back to June of 2010, how was your relationship with the chief at that point in time?
Up until then, I thought it was pretty good.
And you see, you've known him for what, 25, 30 years?
How long have I known the chief?
Yeah.
Yeah, 30 years.
Never have you ever heard him call you or anybody else the word bitch, have you?
No.
So in 30 years that you've known this man, it's all of a sudden on June 2010, without any provocation, without any kind of pre-existing anger or animosity, calls you a bitch. Right?
Right.
And you said Paula Lawrence, who's one of your best friends, correct?
Yes.
You've known her for 30 years, haven't you?
Yes, I have.
So, and you also told Mr. Mitnick, didn't you, that Paula Lawrence heard the chief say the word bitch to you. You said that to Mr. Mitnick, didn't you?
Yeah. I did not hear him say that.
Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes.
You said that he's never said this before, and he said it directly in front of Chief DeVoe, right?
Yes.
And you said Chief DeVoe was right there, and he heard it too, right?
Yes. Yes, he did.
Sir, do you ever recall Chief Cummings ever uttering the words, "You are such a bitch," to Jean Mooney?
It never happened in my presence.
Did you say here today that Paula Lawrence heard the chief call you a bitch?
Yes. I did not hear him say that.
You had witnessed, allegedly, the chief call Miss Sweeney a whore. Did you ever hear him say, call her a whore?
Chief Cummings?
Yes.
Absolutely not.
Are you sure of that?
I'm positive.
Are you familiar with Ms. Mooney?
I am.
How long have you known her?
30 years,
And how about Paula Lawrence?
same amount of time, 30 years.
And how would you categorize their use of profanity within the chief's office?
Pervasive, numerous.
And in actuality, you and Miss Mooney, you use profanity all the time, don't you?
Yes.
F-bombs,
Yes.
frequently. You have to say yes or no.
Yes.
And when we talk about profanity, we just talk about damn and hell.
No.
Anything else?
Yes, they would use well, can I say it here? Fucking, words such as that.
How often?
Pretty frequently.
That's part of your vernacular, right? Everyday conversation,
I
right?
would say probably where I grew up, so yeah.
Do you stand by the comment that you found credible that Ms. Lawrence and Ms. Mooney swore more than any police officer in the Newton Police Department?
That was statements made to me by some of the witnesses.
You do a lot of stuff with the MCAD, right?
Correct.
And you're familiar with what the environment is, plays a role in determining whether or not it's hostile based upon the claimant's own participation in profanity.
Absolutely, I agree.
How long did you interview the chief?
On which occasion?
Well, let's do total. First one starts at 1 o'clock on June 1st.
I'm going to guess probably 25 minutes, a half hour, but I'm not certain of it.
You knew the significance of this, right?
Yes.
And how long did you think I've been questioning you?
Jack.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep this in perspective here. I think
I'm trying to put it in perspective.
how long we've been questioning him, and, you know, we're all here, we're all witnesses, so can we stay on the
Did you
thread?
consider your interview to be as thorough? Did you consider it to be thorough?
Yes.
Now, one of the things that you say is that the chief didn't specifically quote, deny making the statement.
Correct.
Do you know where you were June 30th, 2010? Do
I could not tell you.
you remember any conversation you had back then?
Point of reference to what I was doing or where I was on that day, I could not tell you.
So did you find it unusual that when you asked the chief whether or not he had ever called her a bitch that day? I don't remember saying that. That's what he said to you, didn't he?
Well, actually, I found it unusual that he didn't deny it.
When you say he didn't deny it, that was the tipping point for you? Just admit that. You told us that you interviewed the chief 3 separate times.
Correct.
When was the 3rd time that you interviewed him?
The specific date,
Sure.
I don't recall.
Do you know how long you interviewed him that time?
I heard it was relatively brief.
And did you talk to him at the conclusion of your interview regarding what you had determined at that point?
I believe I told him I hadn't made any determination.
Did you ever say to him that he had nothing to worry about, there was nothing in this case?
I don't recall ever saying
Okay, I listened to your words. You didn't tape record the entire thing,
Nope.
right? And you said you don't recall that. You're not denying you said that then, right?
that. I am denying I said that.
Did you deny it when I asked you first? You said you didn't recall.
Well, but I.
And once again, we don't have a tape recording of that actual interview to know exactly what the chief told you, do we?
No, we don't.
I need to ask for a recess. It wasn't an objection. I wanted to take a minute, and I would just state that while we were having lunch, I had a conversation with Mr. Burke, because I thought his questions warranted some information, and it was in the nature of discovery, even though discovery isn't allowed in these kinds of proceedings. But as an abundance of professional caution and courtesy, I made a disclosure to him, and he can do what he wants with it.
So what am I supposed to do with that?
It's on tape, that's all.
All right. Sir, I asked you numerous questions, didn't I, about tape recording and the importance of tape recording and its preservation of the conversation in as accurate a manner as possible?
You did.
And you said it's not your practice to do that?
Correct.
And did I ask you in general terms, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, whether or not any of the individuals were tape recorded that you interviewed?
Objection, objection. You're asking him to remember the exact language that you used.
Well,
Well, wait. I made the disclosure because I was satisfied as an advocate operating in good faith that no question had
so can
warranted.
you just state your objection and the reason?
The objection is you're asking him to remember testimony, and it's not fair. He doesn't have to remember the exact form of any question that was asked an hour ago.
You can remember the chief's conversation.
Objection sustained. I would say, you know, if you want to provide, you know, maybe we should play the tape. Oh, we don't have a tape. So, I mean, I'm not sure.
Well, that's where we're getting. Did you volunteer the fact that somebody else had tape recorded one of the witnesses that you interviewed?
Well, I did volunteer to counsel for the city.
Okay, well, do you think that he's on an equal footing with me?
Wait a second. He did exactly what he's supposed to do, and I did exactly what I was supposed to do. So why don't you ask substantive questions and move on, please, sir?
So somebody did tape record one of the interviews, didn't they?
The attorney for Gene Mooney brought a tape recorder to that interview.
And you were present and you knew that they did that, right? Did they tell you why they did that?
Her attorney indicated that he was reluctant to have her testify, or excuse me, talk to me without having that conversation recorded.
Did he tell you he wanted to make sure exactly what she said was on tape so there wouldn't be any question about it?
I don't believe that was his words.
Did you ever mention that to me during all the questioning I asked you about the tape?
Objection. And I made a disclosure when I thought it was ethically proper to do so.
Mr. Rooney, the significance of this is that I asked for all statements of all witnesses, and it includes tape-recorded statements. There is a tape recording that's in existence that was not provided to me, that should have been made available to me. I should have had an opportunity to have that prior to Jean Mooney testifying, to have exactly what her statements were. I asked numerous questions of her about what comments she had made to Mr. Mitnick during my cross-examination of her. And there was numerous discrepancies, in my opinion. I was not provided with that tape recording. And my client obviously has put at a direct disadvantage because she's already been released as a witness. That should have been done. And I'm asking you to suspend this proceeding until I'm provided with a copy of that tape. In fairness to him, we should have had that during her direct testimony for me to cross-examine her.
Couldn't disagree more.
I didn't expect you to agree, sir, but we're talking about fairness here. Mr. Mitnick, to his credit, at least disclosed it, okay? The timing of it is an issue, but at least to his credit, he disclosed it. He is an agent of this city. I should have been made aware of that before this hearing began, and I could have taken other steps then to secure it from them. And it's not private property. It's done during the course of a mandated hearing, interview, that she had an obligation to attend.
The record stands that it is not in possession of the city, it's not in our custody, it's not in our control. We cannot get the tape. It's personal property of the of Miss Mooney or her lawyer, essentially. And so your request is denied, and we will continue with the hearing.
Sir, did you read the complaint submitted by Ms. Mooney, submitted on May 21st to the city?
Is that from Attorney Tachi?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And in addition to the alleged comments about poor and bitch, there are several other things that she accused the chief of that you determined completely not true.
I was asked to look into 2 additional ones. I think there are a lot more than just those.
Okay,
2.
and she's the one raising the allegations.
Correct.
And you found that her allegations in 2 of those instances, at least 2, were incorrect or not true. Didn't you?
Unsubstantiated.
Okay, unsubstantiated. Did you put that in the category of a false accusation?
No.
You don't?
No.
What category do you put it in? Just unsubstantiated?
Unsubstantiated. Absolutely.
Because there's insufficient evidence?
That's exactly right.
Well, did you find insufficient evidence that he had falsely applied for some promotional financial benefit that she had accused him of? You think that was unsubstantiated?
If I understand your question, I think I substantiated that the chief did not falsely report.
She accused him of it, didn't she?
Correct.
So that's unsubstantiated? Either he falsely applied for it or he didn't. That's what she said. He falsely applied for it.
That is what she said, yes.
Did you find her accusation to be truthful?
Well, no, what I found was that he appropriately complied with the procedure applicable to getting that benefit.
Did you find another allegation that she made had no merit?
She made an allegation concerning the chief's involvement with the photographs.
And you found that that wasn't true also, didn't you?
It was unsubstantiated. Didn't happen.
So we have 2 other instances in which Ms. Mooney has made allegations
Correct.
that negative about the chief. In reading that letter 21st, did you read that she alleged that he had set her up?
I believe the attorney did say that.
Well, during the investigation, did you find any evidence that the chief had set her up?
No.
The chief was applying for admission to the school, and you were asked to complete an evaluation regarding, in part, his character and personal integrity. In filling this out, she, Ms. Mooney, rated the chief as outstanding in his character and personal integrity. You did an investigation, you talked to 10 different people. Did you find any evidence that he framed her?
Within the limitations to what my investigation was pertaining to? No.
The chief met individually or together with a couple of employees that were actually identified as putting themselves in for overtime, or one would put the other in for overtime. There were only 2 that were assigned to the office that this was taking place, and he met with them to try to curb that activity.
Okay. And who are those 2 individuals?
They are Jeannie Sweeney Moody
Yeah.
and Paula Lawrence.
In the fall of 2010, he told them that they couldn't put themselves in for overtime, and it stopped at that point.
All right. Do you know whether or not there's any hard feelings over that?
There was hard feelings over it,
How do you know that?
because I talked to the women, and I knew it was an issue within the office.
Jean Sweeney Mooney actually said that she was starting to keep a list of things that the chief would do to irritate her, so she could use it against him at some point in the future.
She told you that?
Yes,
Is that the truth?
yes.
When did she tell you that?
It was around the same time period. I would say it was probably in the summer of 2010.
Now, ma'am, has there been any point in time that you've ever heard the chief use profanity towards any other female within the police department?
No, not firsthand, no.
You say you've known him for approximately how many years?
32.
You ever hear him call a woman a whore?
No,
Ever?
never.
If I've ever heard him say bitch, you mean to anyone
Yeah.
or to, no, I mean, he's never directed it at anyone.
You ever have him refer to a woman as a bitch?
No,
Have you ever heard him call a woman a bitch?
I have not.
You said you've known him, this gentleman, for 28 years, was it?
Yes,
You worked with him in different kinds of situations?
many.
Have you ever witnessed any kind of treatment on his part of women that was abusive in any way whatsoever?
Absolutely not.
You ever hear the chief use the word whore before?
No, I have not.
You ever hear him call a woman a whore before?
I have not.
You ever hear the chief call a woman a bitch before?
I have not.
How long have you known him?
Approximately 14 years.
You've known him for 30 years, he's never used that word, you've never heard him call a woman a bitch before. Now, can you tell me, sir, during the time period you've known the chief, have you ever heard him use the word bitch or whore directing it towards a female?
Absolutely not.
Did you ask Lieutenant O'Coin whether or not he had heard the chief ever use the word whore?
I did.
What'd he say?
No.
In 25, 30 years, right? Have you ever been at any kind of seminars or any kind of training or mass chief of police meetings?
Many since then, yes.
Okay. Have you ever heard Chief Cummings use profanity during any of those occasions?
No, I have not.
Have you ever witnessed him abuse anybody verbally, whether they're male or female, even unruly prisoners?
No.
Now, in addition to the word that you never heard him say, other than in June 2010, the word bitch, you ever hear him say the word whore?
Never.
Never in 30 years. But in the 30 years you've known him, you ever hear him use that word in any kind of language with any employee or person or even a prisoner?
No.
In addition to nobody ever hearing the chief say the word bitch before or call somebody that, you also asked him whether or not anybody ever heard him use the word whore, didn't you?
Correct.
Did anybody other than Ms. Mooney ever hear the chief call somebody a whore other than her?
No.
Did you tell Mr. Mitnick that she heard it?
I don't recall.
Did you say here today that Paula Lawrence heard the chief call you a bitch?
Yes.
I did not hear him say that.
All right. Do you know what I'm referring to?
Yes,
Yeah, you're telling us that Paula Lawrence heard the chief call you a bitch?
I don't know if she heard me. Paula Lawrence was at her desk at the time, and I remember when they walked out, Chief Cummings and Chief DeVoe walked out together, I turned to her and I said, "What was that all about? Did you hear him?" And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "Well, do you think he's being funny?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't know, but that's not funny."
I did not hear him say that.
Yeah, you're telling us that Paula Lawrence heard the chief call you a bitch?
I don't know if she heard me.
Did you say that to Mr. Mitnick?
I don't remember. I
Ma'am,
don't
you have a
recall.
perfect memory of everything that happened that day, as you described it. And you don't recall sitting here today under oath whether or not you said to Mr. Mitnick, Paula Lawrence was right there and heard him call me a bitch. Did you say here today that Paula Lawrence heard the chief call you a bitch?
Yes.
I did not hear him say that.
Would you agree with me, sir, that the only person who ever heard or alleged that the chief had used the words bitch and whore is Gene Mooney?
They were actually present
Yeah.
at the time, that's correct.
At some point more recently, we were approached by someone who was investigating these matters for the city.
Yes,
And was that person named Mr. Mitnick?
yes it was,
Did you cooperate fully with Mr. Mitnick?
yes.
The counsel for Ms. Mooney would not let her answer any questions.
So her counsel was present during that time period.
Correct.
So, am I correct in understanding that you wanted to ask those questions, right?
Correct.
Did you cooperate fully with Mr. Mitnick?
Yes,
You were prevented from asking those questions.
Yes, I was.
Now, you have testified that some of these events happened roughly, give or take, 2 years ago.
yes,
And you're currently charged with larceny?
yes.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, you heard from Ms. Mooney, and regardless of what anybody else says, you have the absolute right to make your own judgment of her credibility.
There's been 7 witnesses called here. Only one with an obvious motive to lie who's come in here and accused this man who in 32 years of service to this community, there hasn't been a single solitary witness who say here today under oath that they've ever hear him utter the words whore or bitch in the time they've known him. Nobody. Other than her, Gene Mooney, the person accused of stealing money, the person whose overtime was restricted because he was trying to do the right thing and prevent people from bilking the city out of money that wasn't earned. If it isn't as clear a motive for her to lie here, then I don't know what else is. You've heard every person come in here and say they've never heard him say that word, bitch or whore. Nobody. Even her best friend. You ever hear him say that before, Paula? No. Who's got the foul mouth here? This man or the 2 individuals here who F-bomb repeatedly every day of their working life? And they're offended somehow? There isn't a person back there who's had a problem hearing, and you have a soft voice, anything you had to say during the course of this proceeding. And you're further away than Paula was when he's supposed to have called her a bitch. Never happens. Why hasn't nobody heard that? Why isn't Mr. Mitnick, who is this specialized investigator, who's paid by the hour, never even finds it necessary to tape record the statements for accuracy, or go to the police station? So when Paula says, or Jean says, well, Paula was right there, she heard it. How could she possibly not have heard it? The only way is because it wasn't said. And what does Mitnick say? Mitnick says, I found the chief to be open, credible. Does he show up there with a lawyer who tape records an interview and then secretes it from me? What does Mitnick say about the chief's credibility? Never refused to answer a question. And you know what his cockamamie reasoning is? Oh, he didn't say specifically that he denied it, so I found that unusual. The question was, do you remember saying this? And I asked him, remember what you said in June of 2010? No. So how does he apply that standard to this man? And because he does it according to him, and we don't know that because he didn't tape record it, according to him, he didn't deny the statement. He said, I don't remember ever saying anything like that. Take a little step further. Where you been for 2 years? Why do you think all of a sudden you've got this argument, these contentions, that this man has been so abusive to her? She said it was like a family. Yeah, it was, until she got desperate, until she took the money, and now she's got to go on the offensive. The best defense is a strong offense. Well, let's bring up all this stuff about the chief from 2 years ago. some stuff that nobody else has ever heard. Nobody else corroborates. Okay, Mitnick says, well, she corroborated it. It was corroborated because she told her best friend about it. Her best friend, who doesn't even hear it, 4 feet away. Well, seriously, we judge our lives in people around us, in the realities of who they are. And what I said before about past conduct being the best indicator of future conduct, that is exactly the measuring stick here. I asked one of the witnesses, he worked with 40 traffic control officers, mostly all female. You ever hear a peep from them that Chief Cummings has been abusive? Have been bad to them? We get his quasi-opinion that this is conduct unbecoming. We're going to fire somebody? You're going to fire somebody who's brought this city to be the #1 safest city in the country? Who's dedicated his life every single day to making the lives of these people better? The mayor jumped the gun. And you probably don't want to hear that, but that's the reality here. He didn't have the benefit of sitting here like you did, Mr. Rooney, and hearing this in a factual, objective way. What's the real evidence here? Not Mitnick's, 15, 20 minutes at a time, 2 pages, a page and a half of interview notes from the interview of Lieutenant O'Coin. How many notes you written? How many notes has the clerk written in the 25 minutes since I've been talking? At any juncture here. You think it's like a page and a half? Is that a thorough investigation? Is that fair to a man who's given his life to this city? And I don't need to go into all the lives he's helped save or all the accommodations that he's received. But this is somebody, this city, and the support that he has here is somebody you can be proud of. And to have them turn their back on him now and to waffle in the face of these phony allegations that are not substantiated, that have no validity, that come 2 years after the fact under a clear-cut improper motive, it's galling. You're going to do what you want to do. But I can tell you right now, we all have to live with ourselves. We have to make judgments about what's right and what's wrong. And I hope you make the right judgment here.